Welcome to Raising Your New York City Bright Kids. I'm Alina, author of Getting into NYC Kindergarten and Getting into NYC High School, available on Amazon, Nook, and on my website, nycschoolsecrets.com.
And I'm Taylor Kelly from Bright Kids, America's premier tutoring and publications company.
Public school general ed placements are due any day now. You might even be getting them as you watch this video. But when it comes to the most popular public schools, many more families apply than there are spots for them. A lot of parents are feeling disappointed right about now and looking at all of their options for September 2017, including ones they might not have even considered before.
We covered applying to private and charter schools in previous episodes, right here on the Bright Kids YouTube channel. You can check those out at any time.
But today we're focusing on religious schools. Now there are two kinds of religious schools in New York City. There are independent schools that are also religious. For instance, you have Sacred Heart or Marymount, which are all-girl independent Catholic schools. And you have St. David's, which is an all-boy independent Catholic school. But then you might have a Catholic school that's run by the Archdiocese, say something like the School of the Ascension. You also might have a school like Heschel, which is an independent Jewish school, which is not the same thing as a yeshiva. There are also Quaker schools, like there's Friends schools, there are some Muslim schools, there are Greek Orthodox schools, but the independent schools and the religious schools, they have different application process and they have different deadlines. The independent schools are all in line with other independent schools, so you still have to apply right after Labor Day, and most of those schools have already notified for the following year. The other religious schools might have more rolling admissions, and so there might still be space in them for 2017.
But what do kids get in a religious school that they don't get in a secular school, a public school, or a private school? We spoke to Sandy Callan from the Geneva School to get you that answer.
We are here with Sandy Callan, Director of Admissions at the Geneva School, to get all your questions about religious schools answered. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So my first question to you is, what does a child who goes to a religious school get that they might not get in a secular school, either public or private?
Well, obviously the main thing is the spiritual component. And I think that's wonderful for a lot of reasons. The main thing is that I believe, and I think a lot of families believe, that we're spiritually wired as well as socially and academically. So great for a child to get stretched academically and socially, but how about the spiritual piece? For a lot of families, that's really important. For a lot of children, that's really important, sometimes more important for the child than the parent. So I think it's an incredible opportunity to give a child that chance to get stretched spiritually as well as socially and academically. So a religious school is obviously going to do that, going to take a child and encourage their faith and help them grow on all those levels. So it's a really exciting opportunity, I think.
You call yourself a classical Christian school. What does that mean? Does that mean you don't teach evolution? Does that mean that you disparage other faiths? Because people see that and they don't know what it means.
Right.
So what does a classical Christian school mean?
Okay. Well, first of all, we actually look at all faiths and teach all sorts of information about lots of faiths. But the Christian faith, being the one faith that we believe is true. We believe Christ came for everyone, and that, he is our Savior. So we're coming from that perspective. The classical component is very confusing, I think, for most people. Most people kind of shut down and kind of have no idea, or they think very traditional or rigid. And I love to say anything but that. The truth is, the classical component, or the classical curriculum, has been with us for hundreds of years, the literature thousands of years. It's what we always used to do. And the Americans kind of began to chip away at it in the early 1900s and take some things away or lessen some things. So, for instance, history, grammar, literature, penmanship. We teach cursive writing in second grade. And there's all sorts of science out now about what's happening in the brain when you do those things. And so all those things are affected. Creativity is affected when you learn cursive writing. And so we have held on to that really rich curriculum. We are not afraid of new things. So Singapore math, we're one of the first schools in the city to implement Singapore math. That's gone phenomenally well. But we're really committed to some of that other other curriculum that's so key and so important, and we dig deep into it. So the classical approach is the trivium, so 3 stages, 3 roads, and that has to do with the way a child's brain develops. So when they're very little, they memorize things really easily. They learn things really quickly. So we take advantage of that in the grammar stage and we let them memorize things, but we do it in a really creative way. So children are rhyming and singing and dancing, and they're learning the boringest grammar rule, but they're learning it in a way that makes them think they're learning the coolest thing. So I love the approach in that regard. It's really exciting, very interactive, very physical. 5 senses are used. So once you're past the grammar stage, the logic stage is the middle school stage, and that's when a child loves to question and debate and challenge. And so we introduce logic, that's an actual course, and we allow children to really debate and really discuss. Now, even in the grammar stage, those stages are taught with a Socratic method or shared inquiry. So children are always thinking, they're always questioning, teachers are always leading them to questions. So that's still there, but it's much more so in the logic stage. And then the rhetoric stage is the upper school, high school stage. We bring that down to middle school because we end in 8th grade. So our 8th graders are doing a full-blown thesis with a really incredible live presentation as well as written. So it's really amazing. So the curriculum is quite extensive. So history, grammar, penmanship, geography, literature, really rich science, Singapore math, music, PE, French, chess is part of the curriculum. We switched to Latin for 4th through 8th grade, and then the Bible is taught throughout the curriculum. So it's a wonderful, really rich curriculum.
So that's the classical part. Where does the Christian come in?
So the Christian and the spiritual part is threaded in and throughout the entire curriculum. So we're coming from a Christian perspective when we teach.
For all subjects?
Yes, yes. There's certainly a Bible lesson and a Bible class in the upper school, but the spiritual component, children learn Scripture. They, again, learn it in a really creative, fun way, but we're coming from a spiritual perspective. So when we're studying science, and we study all aspects of science and look at the theory of evolution, and so we look at all that, but we're looking at it through a spiritual perspective. So when we look at a plant, or we're looking at science, we're looking at how God created the world and what He's doing and what He's done. So it's definitely a beautiful picture of Christ and what God is doing in our world in everything, if that makes sense.
It does. My other question is, I know when we were looking at schools and when we looked at some religious schools, my husband's question was always, so while you do religion, what are they not getting? If they're getting this extra class in religion, is there something that you're taking out of the curriculum that another school might have that you're substituting a religion class for?
And I would say nothing. In fact, I think when I rattled off all of the curriculum, we're doing more. And I think there's more to be done. I think when you inspire a child's brain, when it's meant to be inspired and they're just wired to learn, they want more. They just can't get enough. So that day just becomes a richer and richer experience, and you have more time. It doesn't mean that you don't do free play and you don't have recess and you don't, because we're all about making sure that there's a lot of physical components. That's the way the brain operates. It needs that oxygen. So there's constant fluidity and constant creativity and physical recess and all of that as well. But there's time. There's time when children are really engaged, as they are at Geneva, and they're really absorbing the material, then you can get a lot more done. You can have a lot more happening throughout the day.
So you have all that happening, but on the other hand, your tuition is actually considerably lower than tuitions at many New York City independent schools. So again, the question comes, what are the children not getting? Otherwise, how do you make it work?
Right.
I mean, what your tuition currently is?
Approximately 25.
25,
Right.
so that's almost half of
Right.
what some other schools
Right.
are. So how do you make that work without there being a lack, with the children still getting everything?
Right. Well, I mean, some would say, "Gosh, that's way too much for me," and there's some schools that charge less, and so we're saying, "Gosh, it doesn't have to be 50,000. It doesn't have to be 45,000," and we're proving that. I mean, we've had well-known organizations come in and look at us and are shocked at what's happening because they think, as you say, that it has to A equal has to equal B, and the truth is it doesn't. We have incredible teachers that are passionate and gifted, and that's where you're really seeing the difference. With teachers that are really gifted at teaching, then you can do anything, and that's what we really focus on. We're really looking for amazing teachers that we can mold and shape and encourage in this classical Christian approach. So no, I think it's possible. We certainly do not have a space where we're paying off a very, very large mortgage or we're interested in buying new property. We are certainly looking for a long-term space where we can grow and continue to
Because
grow and
you're currently
expand.
in 2 campuses.
Yes, we're in 2 campuses and we are renting space in both those campuses.
You're on the west
So-
side and you're on the east side.
Exactly, West 83rd Street and 64th and Park. So we are able to certainly spend money differently and maybe more wisely in that regard. So that's one way. We're really committed to keeping tuition more affordable so more families can come. We're an extremely diverse community, so it's working. It's working. It's exciting. It's really exciting to see.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thinking about exploring your religious school options? Many of them have rolling admissions, so there's still time for September of 2017. And make sure you join us next week when we'll be discussing school options for your child with special needs.
In the meantime, like our videos, share them with your friends, and get ready for upcoming videos.